Hi and welcome back to the channel. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons for me if you've ever tried to show a Masters of the Air episode to your significant other and they've surprisingly said, this is boring. This week we see part 4 in the build and construction video series for the E-60 paper Panzer. I'll be doing the dry pigment weathering on the lower half of the vehicle. This is a really important step because along with the track work which we did in part 3, this sets the tone and colour qualities for the remaining weathering for this vehicle. Let's get into it. So here's where we stopped last video with the painting done and the tracks weathered. There's one part of the weathering process that I really enjoy more than all the others, and that's doing the dry pigments and oils on the lower hull and running gear. It's because we can set up the basis for all of the subsequent steps by just using a few simple techniques here. Also, it's fun playing with mud effects because as armour modelers, we can go crazy with them and there's so much more room for us to play with. First thing to do is gather all the materials we need for this process. It's important to remember that during the track weathering phase that we use specific colours in our palette, as there is always a story to be told with each project. We'll be using those same dry pigments and oil colours, so let's prepare them once again. As I work through the pigment application, you'll notice I don't use any enamel weathering products. It's not that I have any inherent bias towards any specific products, just that the enamel products really have a monotone texture, which means they're just a single colour and therefore have a lack of depth to them. It requires many different applications of individual colours to get a rich, multi-tone mud or dust, and that's just too much work. Since I'm using custom mixed dry pigments, so you can see my previous video on track weathering for the details of that process, I have an efficient and easy to use system that has subtle colour variation. So as I apply the pigments, I'm having to work around a row of road wheels. This is an unfortunate situation with this particular model due to the unique way the manufacturer created for the road wheels to stick to the model. There are no swing arms or shafts to slide the wheels onto, only little nubs. This meant that in order to check I had the correct length for each track, I had to glue the outer row of road wheels onto each side. Not an ideal situation at all. Now I have to work around them. Really, it's not a problem, as ultimately most of this work won't be seen because the road wheels and tracks will cover it, but I'm going to know it's there. And so are all of you who are watching this video. As I build up the layers of pigments, I'm using 2 colour mixes at a time, which allows me to blend them and get a mixture of both dry and semi-dry looking mud. For this model, I'm looking to have a light build-up of mud, with about 80% being dry. If I was wanting to achieve a heavier mud look, I'll often use my airbrush to paint on some pre-shading to aid with boosting the colour of the pigments and provide a roadmap for their application. But that was not required here. Whilst applying the pigments, I not only am reviewing my own work, but I'm also thinking about what I need to do to adjust the effects for the result which I'm trying to achieve. The best thing about starting on the lower hull is that we can play with the effects to tailor them as required. Small errors here are very easy to correct and won't ruin your model, as they're in a fairly low visibility area. With this E-60 for example, I'm going for a dry summer look, rather than say a wet, muddy winter appearance. It's also a fairly new vehicle that hasn't been in combat for very long, so whilst it will have some general wear and tear and stains present, it won't be beaten up and be some oily old clunker either. For even more depth in the layers, I use the oils to add splashes and fine subtle textures. Using the oil palette to mix a semi-transparent solution, I speckle the solution across the lower hull side, using at least 2 colours to ensure depth and variation. I then keep adding additional layers of dry pigments and oils until I have a final weathered look which I'm happy with. Next I work on the road wheels. I glue them to the model, add the same dry pigments and oils. It's important to keep their weathering and tone consistent with the rest of the model. About now I'm starting to get a very clear picture of the weathering for the upper surfaces of the model as well. The unique design of this E-60 with its integrated fenders which form part of the deck plates means we have an obvious separation point between the lower and upper hull. However, this doesn't apply to the front angle glacis plate or the rear hull plate. It's also important to remember that a great deal more mud is flicked up by the tracks at the rear of the tank than it is at the front, and if like this E-60 there are no mud guards, mud can also be flicked up onto the upper surfaces including the turret. So using dry pigments that I've turned into a bit of a slurry using the same thinner as the branded paint used on the model, which in this case was Mission Models paint thinner, I speckle it onto the rear plate in a slow and controlled manner. I'm very much concentrating on applying the pigments to those areas where they would naturally be stuck to on a real vehicle. It takes a little time and consideration to get that right. Sometimes less is more. You can always add more later, but it's a very messy process to remove them if you've overdone it. Well, that's it for dry pigments and oils for the lower hull, for now anyway. I can hear you asking a really obvious question, but Stuart, what about adding contrast like pin washers and oil stains or grease stains on the wheels, etc.? Well, guess what? That's all coming up in the next video. I want to break down the weathering into some easy to digest steps that show each of them clearly and why I choose to do them that way. So I hope this is working for you. Let me know in the comments if you've got any feedback that you'd like me to know. The next video is all about oil paint rendering and how it can replicate all the weathering features you need on your models. From pin washers to dust and mud effects, rust, oil stains, and even bird droppings. And no, I'm not kidding about that, even bird droppings. I also have a bit of a surprise coming up with this model as it gets all its little accessories added that a kitty cat of this size need. But there's more of that on the next video. Thank you for watching. It does take a lot of effort to release a video each week, especially as I have a full-time career as a sales manager in a highly competitive industry, and model building has always been a hobby for me. Some of my subscribers have recently been asking me if I'll be starting a Patreon channel as well. Well, I can say that at some point later this year, I will be offering a Patreon subscription once I work out a suitable offer for subscribers, which I hope will include the possibility of a monthly PDF magazine and resource section, but more to come on that in the coming months. So until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'd like to give a special thank you to all of my subscribers. And please, if you aren't currently subscribed, look, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell so you get notified as each new video comes out. And subscribing really does help the channel to grow, and it supports me to be able to release more content each week. I'd also like to suggest that whilst working on your own models, maybe listen to a scale modelling podcast to help you pass the time. It's a great way to connect to the hobby community just from the comfort of your own home, and I also highly recommend the first and original podcast team, which is On the Bench. Dave, Ian and Julian are very entertaining and often have special guests on the show and have a wealth of knowledge about our awesome hobby. So please don't forget, life is short. Build more models and try and get out and help your local bricks and mortar hobby store.